Terrain. Why you so cray? I know it's cringe.
If you have to roll a 2 plus to charge, don't roll a 1.
But I love the cringe. There are so many different gaming groups out there, and so many different gaming groups play Terrain differently. Why is that? I mean, I see so many pictures of table setups from so many different groups looking so different, using terrain differently, using different terrain rules. Why is a game that tens of thousands of people play using the same rule set, meaning if this regiment has a march characteristic of 6, that regiment has a march characteristic of 6, no matter what language you speak, no matter what rule book you're reading, it's the same movement. It's the same physical distance in reality from point A to point B. But for some reason, terrain, it's just crazy. Let's go over why I think so many people play terrain so differently. And whenever you want to find an issue, you need to find what causes that issue, the principle, the root cause of that issue. If you see many bruises on your body, the problem isn't the bruises themselves. The problem is either you're getting hit, now you have to stop getting hit, or maybe you have a disease in your body that's causing the bruising. So, why are so many people playing terrain so differently? Well, let's find out, shall we? I have cobbled together a list of 3 locations where 3 different rules concerning terrain can be found: the core rulebook, the scenario pack, and tournament pack. I will provide links to the location of all 3 of these in the description, so you may read them yourselves. For visual reference sake, here are the terrain rules from the core rulebook, and here are the terrain rules for the scenario pack, and here are the terrain rules for the tournament pack. So all the information you see here, I got from those 3 sources. And I've placed each of the bullet points side by side, so let's do a comparison of them. In the core rulebook, no piece of terrain is placed on top of an objective zone or objective marker. No piece of terrain is placed on top of an objective zone marker. Here we have our first issue. There is no such thing as an objective zone marker. So this first sentence is completely irrelevant when setting up terrain. It doesn't exist. What the scenario pack needs is this section from the core rulebook saying objective zone or objective zone marker, replacing objective zone marker. And the tournament pack, no piece of non-zonal or impassable terrain is placed on top of an objective zone marker. Okay, here's where the headache starts. We still have the objective zone marker, which does not exist. There is no such thing as this. Now you have no piece of non-zonal or impassable terrain. Looking at these examples here, this green square is a piece of zonal terrain. This gray rectangle is non-zonal terrain. We'll say it's an impassable wall. This brown square is an objective marker. And this blue circle is an objective zone. So the game has an objective marker and an objective zone. It does not have an objective marker zone. So for the core rulebook, if you have an objective zone or an objective marker, no piece of terrain can be placed on top of either of them. So this wall can't go here. This wall cannot go here. It cannot go here. It can only go here. Same with the zonal terrain. The zonal terrain cannot go here, and it cannot go anywhere within the zone. So as far as the core rulebook is concerned, this is what the terrain and table layout would look like, where nothing overlaps anything else. Now for the scenario pack, once again, there is no such thing as an objective zone marker. So when you say no piece of terrain can be placed on top of an objective zone marker, it doesn't exist. So as far as the scenario pack's rules are concerned, you can place terrain wherever you want currently, until it gets fixed. My suggestion for you, I can't even give you my opinion on how this would work based on intent, because there are contradictory rules given to us from the tournament pack. No piece of non-zonal terrain can be placed on top of an objective zone marker. And remember, this right here is apparently an objective zone marker, which means zonal terrain can be placed right here. Yet the impassable non-zonal wall cannot be placed anywhere in this area. So there's already a giant confusion and contradictions as far as intent is concerned. This is why you'll see some tables play with an objective zone right here and then place the terrain right up against it. Because they're following the core rulebook, no piece of terrain is placed on top of an objective zone or an objective marker. But you sometimes will see terrain and zones like this, or even like this, because the scenario and tournament packs don't make any sense, but the tournament pack especially calls out non-zonal terrain. So that's why sometimes you'll see zonal terrain within a zone during games. My suggestion to fix this is simply to copy and paste the core rulebook, no piece of terrain, on top of the scenario pack and the tournament pack. That would be my fix. Now, there might be intent on why the designers want zonal terrain to overlap zones, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's go to the second part of the rules. No piece of terrain is within 9 inches of another piece of terrain, and they're all exactly the same. So we're good. We're good there. No piece of terrain should have a footprint larger than 9 by 6, and that's the same on all of them. We're also good there. Smaller terrain pieces can be grouped together to form a single terrain piece. This combination of terrain pieces should not create a footprint larger than 9 by 6. So that means if some of you are using the Song of Ice and Fire terrain, which is smaller 2D terrain, you can clump them together to make a single larger piece of terrain. And all 3 of them are exactly the same. We're good there. Can include up to 2 pieces of garrison terrain on each battlefield, which is the same on all 3 of them. We're good there. And remember, it says can, meaning you don't have to. And now we start coming into what I said earlier with the tournament pack allowing zonal terrain to lap over objective zones. For example, on the left here, this is how the core rulebook treats objective zones and all terrain, right? They cannot overlap each other. But in the tournament pack, you can overlap the zones, apparently. I'm gonna remove the objective zone marker and kind of throw it in the trash for now. So we're just dealing with an objective zone. You'll have the objective zone here overlapped by zonal terrain. The non-zonal terrain cannot enter the zone, but we're gonna remove the non-zonal terrain for this example for now, since we know that, at least intent-wise, this is not a possible case in tournaments. This is the only possible case. Now, knowing that you can overlap the zonal terrain with an objective zone in tournament settings, you might ask yourself, why would they allow that, if that is the intent? Because, under the core rulebook and the scenario pack, a battlefield should contain about 6 pieces of terrain, but no more than 8. The rules are exactly the same, so we're good there. But the tournament pack says the battlefield should contain about 8 pieces of terrain, but no more than 10. Now, if any of you out there have attempted to pack 10 pieces of terrain onto a 6x4 table, following the size rules given to the terrain, you know that's pretty much impossible. Especially in scenarios that have 2, 4, 6 objective zones. You just can't do it. So that caveat of allowing the zones, the objective zones, and the zonal terrain to overlap makes more sense. It's so you can fit more terrain on the board. So there's a little bit of discrepancy here, which I'll get to how I would fix this in a minute. The last 3 rules are exactly the same between the scenario pack and the tournament pack. Must include at least 2 pieces of terrain with the obscuring special rule. Must include at least 2 pieces of terrain with the obstructing special rule. And when the tournament organizer sets up terrain pieces, it is important to keep both sides of the table fairly symmetrical to ensure a fair game. So the rules are the same between scenarios and tournament. Here's a little gripe I have, a small thing. For the scenario pack, there is no tournament. There's no tournament here. It's just a scenario, mostly for leagues and, pickup games, seasonal things. For the 6 months the scenario pack is out here in our local store, we're going to play with these scenario pack rules, not the core rulebook. So there is no tournament organizer setting up terrain piece for scenarios. It just doesn't exist. Like when me and Bob go to the store later today to play a league game for Conquest, we're playing in the scenario pack. Neither of us are a tournament organizer. Tournament organizer doesn't even exist. So this should just be completely removed, this scenario pack. This part here should just be removed because it's erroneous. It doesn't make any sense. It makes sense under a tournament setting where there is a literal tournament organizer, and then beforehand and maybe between rounds, the tournament organizer has to set the terrain up, which makes sense. But for a scenario pack, this should just not be here. To set up terrain between two people without a third-party individual, you would need rules for player-placed terrain. And player-placed terrain should be here under the core rulebook and here under the scenario pack, where they would be the same rule. And then the tournament pack could either give the tournament organizer the option for tournament organizers setting up the terrain beforehand or player-placed terrain. Right now, tournaments aren't large enough, in my opinion, where it's too much of a bother for a tournament organizer to set up terrain between rounds. When you have 12 people, 15 people, 20 people, it's not that bad between rounds 1 and 2 for a tournament organizer to scramble on the tables and move the terrain around. But the beauty of player-placed terrain is that for tournament organizers, that time is spent elsewhere, where the players now deal with the terrain, and the tournament organizer can deal with the administration of the tournament, because it's already very stressful for the individual that's running that tournament. So this last part here, I'm not going to harp on this. It's not that important. So, how would I, the Diego, fix the inconsistencies between the three locations of the terrain? So this is how I would streamline the base rules for terrain placement. Both players must agree on an amount of terrain, then choose one of the following. No terrain can be placed on top of an objective zone or objective marker if you are using 6 to 8 pieces of terrain, or no piece, let's just fix that, non-zonal and impassable terrain cannot be placed on top of an objective zone or objective marker if you are using 9 to 10 pieces of terrain. And we can just go ahead and copy and paste that to the scenario pack. For the tournament pack, we then just basically have the tournament organizer must choose one of the following for the entire event. And that's how I would fix that inconsistency. And that fix there also includes the fix right above my head about the 8 pieces and 10 in contrast to the 6 to 8. So this line right here would just be completely eliminated. The scenario pack one, I would just eliminate that since there's no TO. And this is what my final fix for terrain would look like. So if you want to take a look, my head is blocking the rule right here, but in my opinion, until the terrain rules get edited in such a fundamental way where all the players are now playing with the exact same rules, I would probably just advise going with this for now. This will eliminate a lot of disagreements when it comes to terrain and terrain placement. Now, I was tempted on showing a table with placing terrain, but there really is no point. All I would do would be moving terrain around and then measuring 9 inches between them. And there is no standardized how the terrain is placed. That's between either you and your opponent or the tournament organizer. Hopefully you guys got something from this video. Maybe this will help improve and streamline your local games. And hopefully Parabellum, if you're listening, would love it if the terrain rules were a little more standardized. In my opinion, finally, I also play another game, the big sci-fi game, if you know what I'm talking about, and that company released guidelines on how terrain should be placed. And that has made the games at my local store, especially for tournaments, infinitely better. There are no more arguments between players. There's no player-placed terrain. There's no tournament organizer plays terrain, everyone knows exactly what the terrain does and where it is located. So when players from another part of my state come to our store, Dogs of War Gaming, they know that the $900 they spent on their army operates one way at their store with the people that person knows, and then it works the exact same way at a new store with complete strangers. So when they put their models behind a building, it functions exactly as it functions over at their original store. And those are just guidelines for tournament play. The base rules still allow you to do whatever you want with terrain. But I would love it if Parabellum contacted me at my local store and talked about some balancing for putting terrain on the board. Because as someone who understands how devastating terrain can be for charging regiments and for volleying regiments, I have a very strong grasp on what a balanced amount of terrain is, as evidenced by the last stream I did, where it was 2.5 hours of sarcasm on how most people online have no clue what they're talking about when it comes to playing with terrain in Conquest. Anyway, take what you want from this video, improve your game, go buy some more models from Parabellum. It's a great game. I love it. I'm going to start a league in my store soon because I want to get people riled up and playing the game once the army rules come out. So I just love this game. Oh my gosh. If I was like dating a person and I didn't like that person, I would just leave. If there was no ability to align our values together to make the relationship successful. All relationships between humans are based on your value systems. And you hold on to relationships, whether they're business, marriages, it doesn't matter, friendly, whatever, acquaintance, as long as the other person holds the same values as you do in a particular context, right? And if you don't hold the same values or cannot achieve the same values, there's no point in that relationship. That's where you break up and go do something else. If I cannot find common ground with a gaming company or my wife or my best friend, we split up and I go find another wife or new friends or a new war game to play, right? But if I can find common ground, meaning our values are the same, then we can enjoy a wonderful relationship together. Why am I saying this? If I had any ill will towards Parabellum, then I would just simply drop the game and play something else. But that's why I want to improve the game as much as I think the game needs to be improved. But I love the game. That's why I'm still around, and that's why I want to play the game, because the game fulfills my values. When you need a 2+ to place that terrain out on the board, don't roll a table filled with lava with the perilous keyword. Peace out, everybody. Happy gaming.